Hello, and welcome to Waves of YA, a podcast focused on young adult literacy, brought to you by Ocean County Library's Teen Literacy Workgroup. My name is Cecilia. I'm one of the teen librarians at the Ocean County Library. Joining me today, we have
Summer. I'm the teen librarian at the Long Beach Island Library.
And I'm Lindsay. I'm the teen librarian at the Brick Branch.
So in today's episode, we will be focused on books that slap. We can't stop talking about these amazing titles. We'll share what makes a good book for us and what titles we love. So this would be very interesting because we're just talking about books that we love and probably you won't be able to get us to shut up about them.
Our favorite thing to do.
Yes. The first question we have is, what makes you obsessed with your favorite YA books?
Are we talking like specific titles that we're obsessed with?
Just aspects, qualities that make you be like, I can't put this down. You will pry this book out of my cold, dead hands.
I think, I really like when there's a good romance in it, because I'm a romance reader in general, YA and otherwise, and I read romance novels really quickly. So if there's a good romance in a YA novel, I won't put it down.
Yeah, I would say not even for me for just romance. I think the relationships between whatever characters there are have to be pretty strong and interesting, and not like these random people coming in and out for whatever purpose. But yeah, I think relationships in general for me is definitely the number one.
Yeah, I think for me, there has to be some kind of reason why I'm going to keep reading this book. Like, whether it's, I want to know about her backstory, or I want to know if they get together, or who killed this person, or why is this happening, or something like that.
Yeah, I think this just reminded me of a conversation I had about romance novels, but I think it's applicable to the idea of the relationships as a driving force in the book. I was talking about why I love romance novels with one of my friends, and someone we knew had said they didn't like them because, in their opinion, nothing really happens. And I'm using air quotes. And, and my response and our response was like, well, a lot does happen, but it's not structural plot, it's emotional plot.
Mm-hmm.
All the plot happens in the development of the characters' relationships, and that can be romantic or platonic. So I think that's like emotional plot is really big in YA.
Yes, definitely. I think it depends on the genre, but I think a lot of YA can be very character driven over plot. But then there are genres that I don't read that I think are probably more plot heavy and plot driven.
Maybe like dystopian.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't really read dystopian because it makes me too stressed out.
I read a little bit of it, but not too much. I also think maybe like sci-fi stuff is probably a lot to do with the plot. But I definitely prefer character-driven 100%.
I thought that was the case for me, but I'm looking at like all the titles I wrote down, and 90% of them are plot-driven.
Yeah, mine some are too, but there's also really good characters and character development in the ones I have chosen too. So I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like it's both. Because I also feel like some of the books that I really like, there is a lot of plot, but it's like the plot is just the mode of transportation for the character development.
It's true.
Yeah, like one of my favorite YA series is, I'll read anything that Holly Black writes, but the Cruel Prince series I really love. And a lot happens in those books plot-wise, but I feel like it's all centered around the main character's development, like Jude, who she is at the beginning, how she gets to the end. And a lot of stuff happens, but it's like the core of it is her relationships with other people in the book and her development as a person.
Yeah, especially throughout like a series like that too, because you can go from like book 1 to like book what there are 4.
There's 3, and then the 4th one's like a fluffy novella.
And I think there's another one coming out.
Yes, it's the Stolen Air. It's coming out in January, and I really want to try to go to. Holly Black is doing a talk and signing at the Barnes & Noble in Union Square in New York. And I
Ooh.
really want to go, but it's also going to be virtual. So if I can't go, I could do it virtual.
Field
There-
trip.
There's a plug.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not
No great
sponsored.
commercial.
Not sponsored by Holly Black. I'm just really excited about the
What-
Stolen Air.
I feel like we all are sponsored by Holly
Yeah,
Black.
and the Stolen Heir is a character that's like a young child in Cruel Prince is the main character in Stolen Heir. So it's like a continuation.
Like a spin-off.
Yeah,
sort of thing.
Holly Black is from the area. Is
Yeah.
from like Monmouth, Ocean County. I forget which, but so
I've
she's
never
local.
read her.
You must, simply you must.
She is really good. That was like my
Everything.
beginning into YA.
I read the Spiderwick Chronicles first, which is her and Tony DiTerlizzi. Holly Black is like the queen of fairy. I love everything she writes.
Have you read her White Cat series?
I have not. That's like that and The Coldest Girl in Cold Town are like the only ones by her I haven't read, and Coldest is on my shelf.
That one I've heard of, The Coldest Girl in Cold Town, and I think I forget what author I like loves it, like raves about it. But that was the only one I think I ever looked into but never read.
If you want to just try out one of her books, but you don't want to commit to a series, you should read The Darkest Part of the Forest.
That's
Because
a
it-
really good one.
Because it takes place in her larger world of fairy that's all connected, but it's standalone.
I'm not good at series, so that would probably be
I remember that one was like really trippy because you were like figuring things out as the characters were, and you were like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, that's happening. Like,
And you want to hear something cute? I read it and then I told my younger sibling to read it, and they did a piece of art for it, and then Holly Black liked it on Instagram. And they were like, this is the best day of my life.
You're
Like a fan art.
famous.
Like fan art.
Yeah.
yeah, that's a good Holly Black gateway.
Yeah. So
Book.
yeah. If you don't want to commit to a series, Darkest Part of the Forest.
Okay. I wrote it down.
Good. My next question is, what titles, in your opinion, are your must reads? Like, what's the first thing you recommend to somebody who wants to read a YA book?
I always recommend Jason Reynolds,
Oh yeah.
especially Long Way Down,
Mm.
because I think because it's written in verse, it's just accessible.
I feel
It's
really,
open to
I
more
feel really dumb.
people.
I don't know who that is.
Jason Reynolds.
I've never heard.
He's a
Okay,
YA
well now
author.
you have to
And a
put
J
that on your
author.
list.
Is it, what's the genre?
He reads realistic,
Yeah, really.
Okay, then
Very-
I won't read it then.
but you should.
No, not your genre.
He's a very important writer,
No, I'm sure he is. I just do not read realistic fiction.
but you should. This is what
He's
I'm
got a
telling you.
couple
You
poetry books too.
You should read
like
A Long
nonfiction.
Way Down because it's written in verse.
Okay.
It'll take you very quick time to read, and it's very impactful.
Okay. I will make
Mhm.
note.
That's
Sorry.
always one I suggest because, it's hard, especially when they don't know what they want to read or they don't like to read. I always push novels in verse because I
Mhm.
feel like they're like, oh, look, there's no words on the page. Okay, I can read
Yeah.
this.
And it's also a good gateway to poetry because I feel like poetry is another
Yeah.
thing that's like super scary
Yeah,
for people.
exactly.
My go-to is probably, well, I said Holly Black, but I've already talked about her, is Laini Taylor, who
Ooh.
has the Daughter of Smoke and Bone trilogy that I think the first one came out in like 2005. Or maybe 2005. I'm thinking of Twilight. Why am I doing that? I think it was more like 2012 or something. The first one came out.
Yeah, the like early 2010s.
Yeah, like at least 2010s. Yeah. And then she also has The Strange the Dreamer duology, which came out in 2019. And she has a couple of books prior to the Daughter of Smoke and Bone trilogy, but that was like her first like hit.
2011.
Yeah.
We
And
want to be technical.
and I always say, as like to be funny, that a lot of books are titled the blank of blank and blank. Well, I
Yeah.
think she did it. She was like one of the first people to do it.
Pioneer.
Yes, because that was like before the title sequence became popular, The Daughter of Smoke and Bone. I just say that she's a fantasy writer, but her use of language is very unique. I think it's unlike anything I've ever read before. Her wording is very lyrical and kind of gives you this sense of being in a fairy tale. And her Daughter of Smoke and Bone trilogy is set both in our world and in a fantasy world, like you go in between. And then Strange the Dreamer is set fully in a fantasy world. and they're both incredibly good, and the characters and their relationships with each other are so good. And there's like a hint of romance. It's not like the main plot, but there's always some kind of love story in a Laini Taylor book. She's just amazing, and I love her in every sense of the word.
Another one I haven't read.
And I haven't like met anyone else except for our friend Colleen from Brick.
Mm-hmm.
She has read her, but she's like the only other person that I know who's read her.
They're thick books.
Yeah.
But
That's my problem with like a lot of authors.
But you read them so
they're
quick.
too
Like,
long.
you know, the Keepers of the Lost City.
Lost City.
They're so chunky, but these kids read them in like a day because they're so
Yeah.
good. It's like that.
It's true. It's true. It's just like sometimes it's intimidating. You're like, this. Speaking of books that slap, this book will slap me in the face and I'll go unconscious.
Yeah.
It's a big,
Like,
it's
that's
a
how
big
thick they are.
time suck
Yeah,
too.
so,
if
like-
you
so,
don't
like-
like it.
So like Daughter of Smoke and Bone, the premise, also her premise is also interesting. It's this girl, her name is Karu, and she's an art student in Prague. First of all, amazing setting. You find out she was raised by this group of like magical beings called Chimera, who are kind of like monsters. And she doesn't know where they come from, and she has a lot of secrets about her past, but her like adopted father can grant wishes, and she goes on these magical errands around the world from him where she's always acquiring teeth, and she gives him the teeth, but she doesn't know what he uses them for, other than the fact that he can give wishes. And then this thing happens where all blank hits the fan, and she has to figure out the secrets of her past, and she runs into this angel, or not like a heavenly angel, like an angel from another dimension, and she doesn't know what's up with him, and it's a whole thing, and it's so good.
I think I did start reading it at one point, and then like most things, I ran out of time. And
Yeah.
This is sounding vaguely
I
familiar.
quit a lot of books, especially lately. I'm having trouble getting into anything.
And then Strange the Dreamer the main character is a librarian, first of all. So there's one thing for you. I'll always read a book if there's a librarian in it. One of the little standing points is like he had his nose broken by a falling book of fairy tales when he was younger. And his name is Laszlo Strange. And he goes on this journey with this group of people to find this lost city that no one ever has believed is real. But it is real. And they're trying to free it from the shadow of the past where they had these gods ruling over them. And then they killed the gods. But there's still this like looming shadow of their presence over the city they're trying to help them free themselves from. They're so magical though. They're so magical and fun, even though they sound super intimidating from the way I'm describing them.
I always read anything that Elizabeth Acevedo or Tiffany D. Jackson writes. One of the last ones I read was The Weight of Blood, which was so amazing.
Really?
Yeah. Was it not your spiel?
I didn't read it.
Oh,
Did
okay.
you read White Smoke?
I did.
Did you like that one?
I did.
Because I think I read like mixed about White Smoke, so I was like, I'm not gonna read it. And I'm not going to care about the other one either.
Sounds familiar.
And because with Tiffany Jackson, I really like a lot of her other books. But when I was reading Monday's Not Coming, and I'm pretty sure I've said this already on a podcast at some point, it felt a little gimmicky and repetitive from like what happens in her other books. And I don't know the order of how she wrote them. So I kind of got turned off a little and was like, But if you say it was great, I will read it.
I think definitely horror is her genre because these last two ones have been.
Which makes sense because of
Yeah.
some of the stuff that are
Some of
in
this
her other.
it was like light horror, heavy mystery, but these are like just like full on like
Okay.
White Smoke is like a haunted house story, and The Weight of Blood has multiple narrators.
Ooh, that's even better.
And it also involves a podcast.
Oh, that's even
because
better.
It is a retelling of Stephen King's Carrie.
What?
Yes.
So cool.
But
Okay.
modern times and with a biracial protagonist in a town that is currently in the process of having their first integrated prom.
Oh, wow.
And this
That
is
sounds awesome.
no spoiler because it happens at the beginning of the story. The entire town, like in Carrie, is pretty much all dead. Kind of like
Fun.
I think like 200 people die during
Mhm.
this prom night massacre. And if you
Wow,
know
and I'm
this,
looking at the cover and it's beautiful.
yes.
We
And
love a
if you
good-
know the story of Carrie, you
Oh yeah,
pretty
for
much
sure.
know what happens, but she makes it so much more interesting with
Well,
the
we made
pod.
an updated version, so that's
Yeah, so
cool.
she has the podcasting element in there. So you're listening to these two podcasters. One's like a skeptic and one's like convinced that this was something supernatural is afoot. So they're investigating and interviewing people.
Oh, so it's
And
like Sadie.
yeah, it's very reminiscent of Sadie.
What's this called again?
It's called The Weight of Blood.
Okay, cool. Because I know a lot of people like Sadie, and I will recommend this as a dupe.
So it goes between the podcasts and like articles and stuff. The main character, the Carrie S character, whose name is Maddie Washington, and then two other people in the school who are relevant to the story. And in all Tiffany D. Jackson books, there's a twist of some kind.
Mhm,
And I think this
mhm.
is a twist I actually didn't see coming that
really cool.
happens in the
Okay.
book. Yeah. So it kind of follows like the same beats and plot points of Carrie, but like more modernized.
I love it.
And well, it takes place in 2014.
I'm very excited because it sounds. I actually haven't felt excited about a book in a while, so
Yeah,
Oh my
that was
God.
like I
You
like
in-
could not put that down.
Are you in a
cool.
book slump, Lindsay?
I am. I am in a very big slump.
Oh no.
I'm reading little books here and there, like
Mm.
toilet books, I call them.
When
Stuff
I'm
you
in
can't
a
read on the toilet.
when I'm in a book slump, I like to reread one of my favorite books
I should do that, right?
because
You should try anything.
it still counts as reading. It's not like you.
Because usually when this happens, I'll at least be reading audio, but right now I can't. It's nothing.
Yeah, I would reread like one of your absolute favorite books because then it'll give you like the satisfaction of reading, but it's familiar and comforting.
Yeah,
Okay.
especially like a favorite author or something.
Yeah, I picked up a middle grade yesterday because it was real small. So
Yeah, those are good to kind of like lure you back in into the fold.
I did reread a graphic novel that I previously read because the second one's out. So
What's that one?
Incredible Doom.
Ooh,
Oh,
wait,
wow.
Did you read
why
that?
why does that sound familiar?
It's really cool. It's a graphic novel, and I read it when it first came out. I want to say early this year or last year. It takes place in, I think, the 90s, and it's like right where the internet starts. 3 kids, all separate storylines, and then they like kind of come together. But it's so great.
Sounds very
Um,
Stranger Things-esque.
A little bit, but not as sci-fi.
Gotcha.
Or is there 4 kids? There might be 4. I forget. But
I just
I just read it yesterday and I don't remember, Summer. This is what I'm talking about. But it's really excellent and the second one's out. So I wanted to refresh.
I feel like I get this moment when I'm reading, like especially if I'm almost done with the book, where I like get so excited to finish it because then my brain is like, once I finish it, I get to pick out the next one.
Mm-hmm,
And I'm like,
and I do that a lot. I speed read through the end to finish, and then I miss a lot of stuff
Mm.
because I just want it to be not want it to be over, but I want to be done and move on. So, what kind of reader are you? Do you like to read your favorite authors? Like, do you have authors on auto borrow? Are you a mood reader? Do you read by genre?
I'm definitely a mood reader. Like I try my best to like pick out a couple books from my many bookshelves and make like a tiny little pile of stuff I want to read. But I very rarely stick to it because I
Mhm.
might be like, I really want to read this book. But then a week later, I'll be like, no, I don't. Goodbye.
I am so bad with that. I'll collect books, pile them up. I'm like, all right, I'm so excited. I'm going to read all of these books. And then I'm like, but there's this one, and then this one, and then this
Yeah.
one. And then by the time I'm ready to go back to the pile, I don't want to read any of them anymore.
That's
That's
the
like when I have to wait too long for my holds.
No, yeah.
By
And
the
then
time
like,
they're ready, I don't care anymore.
yeah, and I might like want to read, I might pick up a book and say, okay, I'm going to read this one, but then afterwards I'm going to read this one. But then halfway through reading the book, something in the book will influence me to want to read a different book.
Yes.
And
I'm definitely a mood reader too. I totally
Yeah.
agree.
and you have to like give yourself the freedom of that because like I'll start reading a book and I'll know consciously that I like it, but it's not the right time for me to read it. Like I just started reading Serafina by Rachel Hartman, and I liked it, and I thought it was super interesting and a book that I think I will really enjoy, but I was just not reaching for it when I was ready to read. So I was like, you know what? It's not me and Serafina. It's not our moment. Well, if she will, but she will not be the one that got away. We will have our moment in the sun, just not now.
Yeah, I feel that way with way too many books.
That was me with A Discovery of Witches. I tried to read it 3 times and could not get into it. And 2 years ago, I read it and I was like, oh, it clicked. And I think it's because the book starts in the beginning of September and I started it in the beginning of September. So
Like at first you don't succeed.
The season was right.
All right. But I do like authors too. You know, if I have a favorite, I'll always look for that. What about you, Cecilia?
Yeah, I think because we were talking about character driven, the more I think about it, I think if I don't care about a character, why am I going to care about this story? So
True.
it kind of has to like lead me in, make me fall in love with the character. Because I've read books where I'm like, I hate this character. I want something bad to happen to this character. And sometimes that'll get me to read it to see what happens if they get their comeuppance or if anything happens to them. I'm looking at this list right now. Most of them I liked all the characters. Yeah, I'm usually like, I want to know what happens at the end. I want to see like if there's a journey that is gone on. There's genres that I will specifically look for, like romance or mystery or horror, like paranormal, supernatural. I don't think I'm really like a mood reader, more like genre and like character.
I'm a little bit of everything, but definitely I think mood is the top because I'll be like, oh, I'm going to go home and read tonight, put on my fake fireplace on Netflix and
nice.
And it's dark outside now and it's cold. So what do I want to read that's going to be cozy?
Yeah. This is not a YA book, but I think it's like it could be because there's nothing in it that's so adult that a teenager couldn't read it. It's The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. Because that is a really good winter book. She considers it her winter book.
Okay. You have recommended it to me before.
It's so good. I read it several times. I describe her as an author as that she writes in a very sensory way. The smell, the feeling, it's very atmospheric and you can like, all your senses are heightened.
Yeah.
And it's also about like an underground labyrinth of books as well. So.
I just need to sit down and open the book.
It's a big book, but don't let that discourage you.
Any book. I need to just do it. I used to read every single morning with coffee, and now I'm just...
I love Book Talk and Bookstagram as much as the next person, and I think it's a wonderful way to have a reading community, but I also think it brings with it a sort of pressure to always, be reading and to read a certain amount, whereas I kind of miss the feeling of when I was in middle school or below. And I would just read, yeah, because I wanted to. Also, that I never read book reviews when I was that young, obviously.
Same.
So I would just like,
blind.
Yeah, and I kind of miss that.
I miss that too.
And I've been trying to like recapture that too, like not read book reviews and just kind of go into it blind.
That's something, definitely influences me and I get mad because I'll be so excited for a book and then I go read the reviews and it'll be like mixed or maybe leaning towards like a 3 or under star and I'm like, oh.
Yeah, but then I have to remember. But then I have to remember the books that I've loved, I've also seen gotten really bad reviews. So like that doesn't matter. My point is I think that reading has become part of the hustle culture in a way. And you have to make it more like switch the lens from something you have to do to making it a self-care item, making it an indulgence almost.
It's true. I like that.
Yes, I'm so wise. So wise am I.
It is. Those are some wise words. Okay.
Thank you. Told you my soul is old. It's an ancient soul.
If it doesn't slap, will you quit? How long do you usually give a book to hit before you make a decision to just stop reading?
Really depends on...
Yeah. I've stopped books like halfway into them.
I've given 100 pages and more and then been like, I can't do this.
Yeah. I think
I'll get towards the end and just skim to the end because I hate it and I just want to know what's going to happen.
I think if I'm halfway, I will finish it. it's not necessarily that I feel guilty. It's more just like I put so much time into the
Yeah.
story. I need to
Mhm.
like find out what
You get
happens.
like
Not me.
angry. You're like, I don't want this to be a waste of time.
No,
I'm
but I-
going.
But I feel like that doesn't often happen because most of the time I will decide very early on if I want to read it.
Yeah, I think the
Sometimes
earlier the
my
better. Definitely.
Yeah, sometimes my issue is too that it's not even that it's bad or anything. I'm just not there like all the way
Mm,
like focused when I'm reading it, whether it's listening or like physically reading. So
yeah.
I'll start zoning and miss a lot, and it's just too much to go back and reread.
Yeah.
So I'll just give up.
And that's why I get so confused when I read really negative book reviews because I'm like, if you hated it so much, why did you finish it?
Yeah.
You could have just put it
You
down
could
and
have
read
stopped it.
something you actually liked.
Yeah.
Why are you mad? What do you prefer, a standalone trilogy or a long series, etc.?
Standalone for sure for me.
Yeah, I don't think I have time to commit to.
There's too many books and stories for me to engage in
Yeah.
a 12, 15 book series that are doorstop. And I'm sorry.
I get
Yeah,
really
sorry.
I feel like I never got out of that childlike wonder of a series because like
Mm.
when you interact with middle grade readers, how excited they are about a series.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I am
Yeah,
still like
next
that.
book of this.
I am still like that. And if
I used to be like that.
if I find an
don't- Yeah.
author and I realize they have a huge backlist, I'm like, amazing. This is amazing, especially for romance novels. Again, not YA, but I love a good series. I also love a duology.
I could do two.
I feel like a duology is like a really good number. Another author that I'm really excited to recommend all the time, and she only has like 2 books out, but she's working on a third. Is I don't want to say this wrong. Hasfa Fazil. She wrote We Hunt the Flame
Yes. Yeah.
duology, which I read last year and I loved so much. And on her Instagram, she said she's writing another book, and I'm really excited.
I
That's
don't know.
one that's always on my list, but like again, there's like so many.
I might buy it for my dad for Christmas. I hope he doesn't listen to this. Because I describe it as like it's a classic quest story, but it's set in a fantasy world inspired by ancient Arabia. And it's so good. But also most of the book takes place on a desert like a island in which there is a desert. But I consider it a winter book in my brain because I read it last December.
The cover of the first book has very wintry
Yeah.
color screen.
And I think her like home village is wintry, but most of the book takes place in a hot climate. And also it's a dual point of view. So you get like, there's like a slight romance. Again, it's not like the main thing, but it's there. But you get the main guy and the main girl's perspectives, both of them. And I love a dual point of view. When it's just one point of view, you only get the one perspective. But when it's at least 2, you get varying perspectives.
I definitely agree. I think it, I don't know, it just makes it more dynamic and interesting to read.
Yeah.
Overall, in every way.
Especially because, and this is not a spoiler, in We Hunt the Flame, one of the characters is an assassin. And if we just got the main girl's perspective of him being an assassin, we would think that he was just like evil. And until she learns he isn't. But from his perspective, you understand like why he is doing this and how he's been kind of forced to do this. And you understand his complexities of character as well.
Yeah, I'm looking at my list of books and trying to see like a lot of them have dual perspectives. So it's just more interesting that way.
It just is. Yeah.
Yeah.
It breaks it up. I feel like it can get drawn out or feel long if it's like the same person.
Yeah. And like sometimes you'll go back and see like a similar scene from that character's perspective or like the continuation of that scene and like the other person was feeling one way, especially in like romances. And just be like, well, the guy is definitely not feeling this way yet. Or like
there are definitely books I do like a lot that, you know, it's just that one perspective. But
yeah, and now that I'm thinking about it, most of the books that are my favorites are dual perspectives. Yeah. Another good duology is the Hazelwood duology by
Melissa Albert.
Yeah, Melissa Albert.
Albert.
I love that duology so much.
It's so pretty to look at.
Yeah. Not a dual.
I see it all the time and I'm like, this is so nice.
And the first one is not dual point of view, but the second one is,
Mm.
which is interesting now that I'm thinking about it. I do like a fairy tale retelling, but more so than a fairy tale retelling, I like a book that has the feeling of a fairy tale without mirroring a specific one.
Okay.
Like it has the feeling like I'm reading a book that's about the history of fairy tales, and it's like a literary criticism about fairy tales and how we perceive them as a culture. And they talk in depth about what makes a fairy tale. And more than anything, it's like this, they're so ingrained within our identity as a collective consciousness that we know a fairy tale when we're reading one. For example, there can be a story with a fairy in it, but that doesn't make it a fairy tale. And so I like books that have the feeling of a fairy tale without necessarily being a retelling of a specific one, like Little Red Riding Hood or something.
This is not YA, but it could be. Did you read Catherine Arden's Winter Night trilogy?
It's on my list. I actually have the first one.
That's like what you're describing is like, that's what it's reminding me of.
But that one I do believe is also inspired heavily by Russian fairy tales as well, which it's actually on my holds list. I think I had like a series of winter themed books set on a hold to activate today, and now I'm kind of regretting it because I know they're all gonna come in for me at the same time.
At the same time, yeah.
I read the first one and I just got the second one, so we'll see. But I really love the first one, and it definitely sounds magical and like fairy tales, like you're saying.
Sorry if my little tangent was like extremely nerdy.
No, I love it. So.
Wait, we had a question we missed. It was, does the cover of the book factor into if you like it or not? Will you pick it up, a book up more if it's pretty?
Yes.
Yeah.
Plain and simple.
Plain and simple. I was just curious because I feel like the answer is always yes. Like, don't judge a book by its cover, but
we all do.
Always judge books by its cover, 100%.
Yeah, it's the first thing you see. Like
everyone does it. You get drawn. You're attracted to it.
Is there any kind of book cover that you like, don't like, that you hate?
But you like the book?
Or like maybe you do, or maybe you don't. But like a book cover, like what are your book cover turnoffs? They don't do this as much anymore, but I remember when I was younger in YA, this was popular when there's like real people on the cover, like a photograph. I'm like
photographs.
No,
yeah, it's not too often anymore.
Yeah, it's
now they're more like portraits and
or illustrated. Yeah,
and illustrated. Yeah.
Although with again, this is not a YA title I'm talking about, but in the romance genre community, there's a heavy leaning towards the very simple silhouette illustrated covers, which I don't like as much because I love historical romance, and I am a huge fan of the cheesy, classic historical romance covers. A lot of people think they're cheesy and they don't like them or they're embarrassing. I think they're cheesy and wonderful. And I like that that's like the classic. You can tell that it's going to be a good classic romance by the cover. But when it's like an illustrated, simple silhouette cover, I'm kind of like, is this going to be what I want or or not?
I'm looking at my book list and I'm looking at, I think you guys both know the book Fable.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Like a photo like that. Okay. That is aesthetically pleasing. It's very beautiful.
What turns me off is if it's the whole body.
Yes. So, but then I'm looking at Leah Johnson's Rise to the Sun and I hate it. I liked the book. And I can't even tell if it's a photograph or just a very well-drawn piece of art, but I don't like it. Because I want to picture what they look like on my own.
No, exactly. Like, you know how Ali Hazelwood has been really popular lately? I read the Love Hypothesis for a book club I was in, and I knew that it was based on a Star Wars fan fiction, which is fine. But the illustrations on the cover looked so much like the actors that I'm telling you the absolute truth. I took a sticky note and I put it over their faces because I didn't want to imagine them as the actors. Because A, like you said, Lindsay, I like to imagine what they look like by myself. And B, it felt very invasive towards the actors.
Yeah.
I felt like I was invading their privacy by imagining it as them.
Did you like that book?
I liked it. It wasn't my favorite, but I enjoyed it.
Slap.
But also, it was a contemporary romance, and I tend to like more of a genre romance, like fantasy, sci-fi, historical. I don't bar myself from reading contemporary. It's just not always my favorite. Like, it has to really have something
Yeah,
to,
I get you. I feel that. That's how I am with like fantasy stuff.
Yeah,
I'm
I
like
feel like I'm that
opposite, like
way with fantasy
it
too. It has like that extra like
something.
oof.
Hmm.
Mhm. I will just love fantasy novels in general. Like, I'll read any
Yeah.
fantasy, but that's how I was as a kid too. So, like, I think it's our reading tastes, I feel like, are cemented very young.
Mm. Well, like I used to
I
read a
don't know.
lot of fantasy when I
I
was
read so much slasher stuff.
younger.
Maybe I'm wrong. I could be wrong. I just know
Yeah,
that
and I liked more fantasy too.
I just feel like when I was young, I read like anything fantasy, anything fairy tale, anything magical, or with fairies, like specifically fairies in
That
it.
was
And
yeah,
I'm
that's what I
still
read.
doing that.
That's what I read and I read none of that now.
Why do you think that is? I'm
Um,
curious.
maybe it's because I'm jaded. Now I'm like my fantasy is like a
I'm
healthy relationship.
Well, then
that's
you
what I
should.
was gonna say.
Well, then
I'm
you should
just
read
looking for people to relate to. It's
Yes,
Chichelia.
like
yeah.
Chichelia, if that's your version of fantasy, you just need to get really deep into romance novels. I
Yeah,
have some recommendations for you. I'll email you later.
yes. Yeah. I do want to get more into like romancy stuff.
just not Colleen
Yes.
Hoover. Does anyone have like a real great book they read this year since we're moving on to 2023?
The two that I put on the best books of 2020 were the new Melissa Albert book, Our Crooked Hearts, the author of The Hazelwood, which was good. I liked it. I didn't like it as much as The Hazelwood, but that's hard to beat because I loved it so much. Our Crooked Hearts was really good. It's very witchy, dual point of view with the mom and the daughter and like different timelines, which was really cool. And I also read A Far Wilder Magic,
Oh, I wanted to read that. Was it
which
good?
was it was so
Yeah.
good. Again, it was like there was stuff happening. A lot of it was like it was a speculative history where
was
it's
it?
like 1950s ish America, but because they don't specify the year, I think, but it's as if like alchemy is a respected field that everyone knows exists, and it's just part of everyday life. And it's this girl who's a sharpshooter, very Annie Oakley, and this boy who's training to be an alchemist, but he's like been kicked out of every apprenticeship he's ever had. And they join together on this yearly hunt that this town has for this magical creature that you need to have like an alchemist and a sharpshooter to join the hunt. But it's also really a lot about family dynamics for both of them because he has this big family that's like five older sisters and they're very poor. And she has just one mother that is like always traveling and away and it's kind of like this absentee mother who she just wants her love. And it's also really cool because it reflects a lot of social issues of today, but also that because it's set in like a past time, but it's not a specific past time. For example, the boy, his family is, they don't call it being Irish Catholic, but they are definitely Irish Catholic, but they just use a different word for it. And there's a lot of prejudices on them where they live. And the girl is definitely, they use a different word because again, it's like a speculative history, but she's definitely Jewish and she has a lot of prejudices in the town she lives in on her. So you get a lot of historical nuances and social nuances, but it's in an alternate history. So it's like our world, but different. So all the words are different. The countries are called different things. Like
It's just a layover of whatever it's supposed to be.
like the countries and the cities are all
Yeah.
different names, and all the ethnicities have different names. But you can tell through reading it
What there are
what it's
in
meant to
relation
be.
to us. Yeah.
Yes, because it's an alternate history. Because there's fantasy elements too, and there's also a romance, and it's a dual point of view, and it was so good. And I want to, and this author only has like one other book she's written, and I want to read it. And she has another book coming out in 2023 about this fantasy world and this girl who's like a magical dressmaker. And so I was like, amazing, going to read it. But in my brain, I'm like, okay, that also means I have to read her previous book too. So I cover all the bases.
The one that I put on that list, it's a graphic novel, it's called Blackwater. And I think Goodreads describes it really well. It's for fans of Heartstopper and Teen Wolf.
Oh,
Um, Yeah, so it's about a track star that gets involved with the quiet boy who can also see ghosts. And there may or may not be werewolves and ghosts and teenage drama in the
Much
book.
like Teen Wolf. I liked Teen Wolf when it was out, but I
Yes.
never finished the series.
Oh, apparently it used to be a webcomic.
Oh, cool.
Oh, there you go.
Extra
I read it. I
points.
liked it. Is there gonna be more? Do you know?
I don't think so. It was really good. It was one of those ones that there could be another one, or it was fine just as is. I also really
I would
like
like another one.
werewolves, so that was
Yes,
a plus
that
for
was
me.
cool. Yeah,
There
yeah,
was
yeah.
there was another werewolf story I read this year, Artie and the Wolf Moon. I think that's what it's called.
Are werewolves one of your go-tos? Like you'll pick up any werewolf book?
Yeah,
That's cool. Did you read Squad?
I did.
I
That one
loved that one.
I love the artwork in that, but it did not hit it for me. I don't know what it.
I felt like I really liked it, but I feel like it broke off really abruptly.
Yeah.
I would have liked it to be longer or a series because you know I love a series.
Yeah, it like it ended really abruptly, and I was like, "Oh, how did we get there from here?" Like I didn't understand why it ended the way it did.
Maybe if it was just longer.
Yeah, I think if it was longer, if there was more character development or something in it. Are there any books that are on your, I'm just curious, if there's any books on your list that hit it for you, but are not in a genre that you normally read? For some reason, you're like, I don't read this like
Yeah,
realistic
I have
fiction, but
one.
Me too.
One of them was Burn Down, Rise Up. And I only read it because it had Stranger Things vibes, apparently. It sells it as Stranger Things meets Get Out.
Ooh.
I really loved it. I thought it was so weird and cool. It takes place in the Bronx, and there's like a whole underground. This girl, these people keep going missing, so she has to figure out what's going on. But it says Stranger Things meets Get Out in the sapphic horror debut from non-binary Afro-Latin author Vincent Torrado. It was really cool and different. And yeah, it definitely had Stranger Things vibes, but it wasn't, it wasn't a ripoff or anything. It was really,
And is it like a genre you don't normally read?
Yeah, it's kind of like sci-fi, like I don't like horror, I guess, a little bit. And I don't read a lot of that stuff. I feel like I'm only now getting into it because I like Stranger Things so much. Yeah, so definitely something I'm not used to. And it was surprisingly wonderful. So.
Yeah, I was just saying earlier that I don't read contemporary. One of my favorite books, especially to recommend, is Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell, which I read when I was in high school. So like I've liked it for a while, but I really like it. I think especially just because it's a book about like a really nerdy character, and I really like a nerdy character, and I find the way it's written very soothing.
Okay.
So
I didn't read it, but I just finished the
manga. They have a manga version of it now.
Rainbow Rowell's
Carry On.
This new story collection.
Oh, the rainbow. What? It has a rainbow on the cover.
Yeah, Scattered Showers.
Okay, oh, I didn't know about that one.
And it's like short stories, and I really liked a lot of them and her writing. So, and I read, was it Eleanor Park?
Yes, I read that too.
Eleanor Park.
I read that one a long time ago, but I haven't read anything else really. And I really kind of feel like I want to get into more of her because
Fangirl's good.
I enjoyed the short stories. I know, and everyone tells me to read it. Well, there's like a couple like of the short, and I know in the collection, I think one couple in the story was from Attachments, which was another book that she wrote.
She wrote a couple of adult books.
And I want to say, and Landline is another one. I want to say there is
another book I read that's kind of like different than things I usually read is Catfishing on Catnet, which is, it's science fiction, and I do read science fiction, but this one was set in our world, and it was about an AI, which isn't normally something I'd reach for in general, but it has like a really weird premise, and it's a short book, so I read it, and I really liked it. I think, again, like there was just something about the writing style that I found soothing, and it's about this girl, and she's been moving around her whole life from town to town with her mom, and she's always been told that they're on the run from her father, who is a bad guy, and he's going to find them at some point, and so they keep moving around, and that's all she really knows. She is always on this social media forum called Catnet, which is kind of like Discord, but it's like specifically for like sharing cute animal pictures. She has like a community of friends she really likes on Catnet, and it's a dual point of view, but the second point of view is from an AI who runs Catnet, the social media forum. What's different about it is that the AI isn't the villain. It's like a super friendly AI that loves cat pictures. And it literally, all it wants to do is talk to their friends on the cat website and share cat pictures and like protect their friends. And you kind of find out, the girl starts slowly finding out that it's an AI and kind of not sure what to do, if they can trust it, blah, blah, blah. But you're also getting the point of view of the AI, which is super cool and unique. And again, like I feel like whenever you read science fiction with AI, they're always the villain. But this AI is like super sweet, like marshmallow.
Not me trying to place a hold on it now, but
And it was super short too. And it's LGBTQ friendly, the character. It's not like there's like a tiny bit of romance. It's not the main plot, but it's there.
I feel really dumb. I did not realize it was about cats, even though it says it in the title. Like,
Well,
I don't know what in my brain.
Catnet for
just-
me, I think, was how I knew. But
catalog or whatever.
And I'm looking at the cover, and she has a hoodie on with cat ears.
Yeah,
Wow.
there's a sequel that I haven't read, but I will
Yes.
at some point.
Sounds really good.
Chaos on Catnet.
So I think mine in a genre that I normally don't read was Before We Disappear, which is a historical fantasy, I want to say,
Mm.
or speculative fantasy. It's basically The Prestige meets What If It's Us.
Oh, is
uh,
it good?
It was really good. It was one of those ones where I kept stopping it just because it's one of those hefty books. It's like a 400 pager. And I kept stopping it, but I kept renewing it and like trying to go back and continue finishing it because it's just the whole, like, it takes place in 1909. It's in the Yukon Pacific area. So it takes place in Seattle during the World's Fair. And it's these two boys that are magician's assistants that fall in love. And one of the boys actually
Love it.
has magic powers. But
Oh.
there's sinister things afoot. The people that they work for are like not who they appear. And they're trying to run away together, basically.
Aw.
And it ended really, that's spoilers, but it ended really happily. And that made
Okay. I
my,
thought you were gonna
I-
say it ended tragically. And I was
No,
like,
I
it-
read
no.
I
It
read
ended
him before,
really
so
good.
I'm curious.
Yeah, I was hesitant because I think I read a book by him and I despised it.
Ooh,
I
wonder
like-
what it was.
That is so
Uh,
weird.
And I was just like, I love the premise. I don't normally read historical fiction, and I don't really read fantasy now.
Yeah.
And it was sort of an alternate history too, because LGBTQ like issues were like, no, this is normal. It's fine. They're gonna go out and party and hold hands and be fine.
Yeah. I know
It's-
We Are the Ants was really popular that he wrote. I haven't read it, but I read The Past and Other Things That Should Stay Buried, and it's like about the girl who's dead.
How do you feel about books that like have open-ended endings? Like
It
books,
depends.
because did either of you read Horrid?
Yes.
'Cause that
I
one
love
had,
that
like-
that's a good cover
Yeah,
though.
'cause
That cover
that
is
one-
amazing.
Because that one
That
had an ending where like it
What
was kind of
happens? Because
open.
I can't remember.
Should I say it? Because it's a spoiler. Okay, like skip ahead
like
5
I
seconds.
vaguely.
It has an ending that's sort of, she almost like succumbs to her own darkness, I would say.
Uh-huh.
That's vague
Yeah,
enough.
Okay.
But it's very like open-ended, like you're not really sure what she's gonna do next.
Is that
think it
weird? Is it
depends.
weird that slight spoiler made me want to read it more?
Oh no, not at all. But the
I
other thing about
feel
the book
like-
is that I read it as an audiobook and I didn't hate
We
the
have it as
narrator
an
and
audiobook?
I didn't hate the narrator enough to stop reading it, but I'm just weird with narration where like a voice will gently grate at me over time. And I'm just like super particular about voices and narration.
Me too. Oh, me too. And I will quit books and not read them physically or anything. But to answer your question, Summer, I think it really depends on the kind of book it was the whole time.
That's true. I think especially with horror books, with horror
I
advice.
think it can be cool.
Yeah.
But I really think it depends, like, what it's actually the story is.
Because with horror, I feel like it can heighten the suspense, like to leave you like suspended at the end. But if it's not horror or anything, I feel like it can just leave you unsatisfied.
Yeah.
Yes. It really,
Because I was just thinking about that book before.
A bad fantasy book that has the cliffhanger ending is always terrible.
Yeah, especially if it doesn't have a sequel.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
like-
Don't they all have cliffhangers?
Yeah.
I don't. I feel like most of them have cliffhangers, but usually the
Like a-
cliffhanger is not like they're actually hanging from a cliff or something.
Like a bad cliffhanger where they don't explain, like you have to wait for like every single question in the next book. Like it did not explain anything.
Wait,
or-
did either of you guys read the Percy Jackson series? Because there's a book where they're literally hanging from the edge of a precipice at the end of one of the books, and then in the second book, in the dedication page, the author apologizes for the cliffhanger, but then goes like, "Sorry, not sorry, ha ha ha," on the dedication page, which just is like the kind of author he is,
Cool.
which is amazing.
Thanks for joining us today. Be sure to check out the Ocean County Library's website for more podcasts and events. All titles mentioned in today's episode can be found through the Ocean County Library, free with your library card. Until next time, happy reading.